through there and suck it through there.
Suck it? They literally get in and like that, suck the thing out?
Yes, many times when it choked you went down too quick.
Ugh. Right.
I got very friendly with him, and he taught me an awful lot about the art of
poaching.
No one, I suppose, imagined when they were being built that there'd come a day when there'd be a derelict.
So, if you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't gamble, you don't fornicate, you're going to end up with money.
Okay, home James, and don't spare the horses. Each time I come to a place that's new or relatively unknown to me, one of the first tasks I have is to try to identify what are the characteristics that make this place unique. How does it differ from all other places? And what are the features, whether natural or historical, that set it apart from the rest of the country? Now, sometimes it can take a long while before those unique aspects begin to emerge, and you can be left grasping at words to describe and define something that's vague and perhaps only dimly glimpsed. So it comes as a great relief when you can stand in a place and say with confidence that at one stage in fairly recent human history, this place was part and parcel of an enterprise which, in terms of its scale and the excellence of its end product, was quite simply the best and the biggest the world had ever seen. Welcome to the parish of Tullylish, on the banks of the Upper Bann in northwest County Down. That end product whose excellence I refer to was, of course, linen. The Upper Bann, and particularly this stretch of it, some 6 miles between Banbridge and Guildford, was the very lifeblood of the Ulster linen industry, which not only dominated world markets in its heyday, but also the lives of the thousands of families who were yoked to this great machine from the cradle to the grave. The empty shell of the Dunbar McMaster Mill in Guildford stands like some mighty monument to a bygone civilization, whose glorious pinnacle in the middle of the 19th century was the envy of factory-owning industrialists the world over. In its time, this was the most technologically advanced industrial temple there had ever been, employing some 2,000 people, many of whom lived in tied houses in the towns and villages, and not to mention the thousands of rural workers engaged in those allied and essential tasks that fed the great enterprise. Growing the flax, retting it, scotching it, spinning, weaving, bleaching, beetling. It's impossible to exaggerate the central importance of linen in the life of this community. When McMaster's opened a mill in Greenwich, New York in 1880, thousands of people emigrated from here to sell their skills, take up the new jobs, and make Americans out of their children. It's estimated that the population of Guildford at that time was reduced almost overnight by 50%. Global capitalism is nothing new to these parts. But Tullylish as a place of human settlement goes back millennia before the linen industry. The Liss was a fort, and it stood on the Tullach or hillock. Hence the ancient Celtic, possibly pre-Christian name Tullylish, which subsequently described a monastic settlement, a parish, and at least 2 churches that we know of. I was afforded a whirlwind tour of the parish, the village and the history by local historian and author Plunkett Campbell, who had a couple of claims to fame for Tullylish churchyard. Or is it graveyard?
In the Annals of Ulster, there's a record of a monk or an abbot being slain here in 810, and it's the only record of an abbot being slain.
He died a violent death, in other words?
Violent death. Reasons unknown.
We don't know why.
No, there's no reason. Then, subsequent to that, there was a church here in 1641. It was destroyed in the rebellion in 1641.
Yeah.
And this present structure would have been built, I think, in 1698.
So that's the tower that comes from that particular time. Possibly those wee castellations at the top built on subsequent to that, do you think?
Oh, it would have been.
Yeah,
it would have
because
been.
they're a little bit of confection added onto it, aren't they, really? Or it's a kind of tower, you imagine, Rapunzel, is that her name, letting her hair down or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
So this since then, of course, it's become a graveyard, I can see.
The cemetery, yes.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a history attached to this as well, because William Butler Yeats' grandfather was rector here.
His grandfather. Right.
And his father was born here in Tullylish.
So William Butler Yeats' father and Jack B. Yeats' father, he was actually born here, right?
His father was rector here from 1838 to 1862.
Right.
Played a leading role in the famine relief
Is that so?
period because
Yeah,
he would have collected, and there's evidence and the amount of money collected during the famine period of over £2,000 from the linen mill owners in the Ban Valley
It's a
here.
big sum in
A
those
big sum of money.
days. Yeah, yeah.
So, a Yeatsian connection that isn't perhaps widely known beyond this area. The part that is widely known is of course the linen industry. But it wasn't until I talked to Plunkett that I began to appreciate the role of the Upper Ban in that history.
We had 8 major factories or bleach screens.
Eight big.
big
These are all
industries.
separate. They're all
all
separate
separate, yes,
companies. Yes.
all separate companies.
And all doing essentially the same thing.
All doing essentially the same thing.
Right.
So that's because of the qualities of the river,
Mm.
that is ideal. In fact, you know, you had industrialists from Belgium sending their linen over to be bleached on the river Ban here. Yes,
And really, the water was that good for that purpose.
for that purpose.
See,
yes.
I didn't realise that the quality of the water had any significance as far as the bleaching was concerned, because I
No,
thought that
it
was
is.
a kind of a sun more than anything else.
Well, the sun did bleach it, but then had to go through the processes.
Of course.
You know, if you take the processes that we've identified in the
Sure.
production of linen,
Mm.
it is an expensive material
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
So many
you know.
people had to make their living out of it.
Absolutely, yes. If you take Guildford Mill itself, I mean, it's famous all over the world for the fine quality of linen thread. This was exported to the continent for
Yes.
weaving.
Yes.
And they had gold medals in Philadelphia, Toronto, London, New York for the fine
So it
quality.
was world famous, literally world famous.
World
really.
famous when you think that the finest quality of thread that they produced, used for embroidery and for lace, it was sold by weight. But a pound weight
Mm.
had 36,000 yards.
Say that again. A pound
Pound
weight.
weight of the linen
It
thread.
took 36,000 yards of linen thread to make 1 pound weight.
1 pound weight. That was how fine a quality thread they were producing in Guildford. Yes.
That's beggar's imagination.
Doesn't
that's
it?
really-
Doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know what they were selling a pound weight of linen thread at, but after laborious calculation, I've worked out that that is over 20 miles in old money. No wonder cotton and then synthetics pushed linen beyond most purses. And of course, it all collapsed, leaving behind, well, quite often a striking imprint on the landscape. Something for the ivy to cling to and the buzzards to perch on. And that imprint has been left on the river as well. In this case, still energising the water effectively after all these years.
If you see in times of flood, you don't have that pure quality of water.
It's quite brown, doesn't
It's
it?
quite brown. So what they do, just beside the mill, beside the factory, they would have a reservoir or pond where they would accumulate the water
Right.
and then use it.
That would be
Well,
allowed to settle, and
settle
the
down.
mud would fall to the bottom. Is that the idea?
And yes, and they'd also use it for driving the turbine,
see.
and also for
For bleaching.
bleaching and dyeing, because in Guildford they would have been dyeing the cloth as well,
I see. Right.
dyeing the threads.
Right.
So that's the function.
So this reservoir company guaranteed the water all year round. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. But they were charged for the water.
Of course, right.
And the way they charged them, if you would see the drop, it was £1 per foot, was it per month or per year.
So really, I mean, we were saying earlier on, the river was I feel like one of the raw materials anyway that was used for the whole
Absolutely, yeah.
business. But it was a very, very important one.
When you consider that they imported linen, green linen, that is unbleached linen, to be bleached here in County Down from the continent. And of course, you know, around here you would have had the linen on the fields bleaching.
Right.
Somebody would have called white lands because, you know, like snow.
I'm holding in my hands 2 pieces of linen. In my left hand, what we would all recognise as nice, crisp white linen, and in my right hand, what's called green linen, even though it has a dull grey, beigey colour. Now, to get it from this state to this state requires bleaching. And in the days before chemical agents, that bleaching was done in places like this, a bleach screen. A big field, a slope facing south that collected whatever light was available in this country. And mind you, that's not a lot. Direct sunlight would certainly have speeded the process up, but even diffuse light on a cloudy day like this got the job done. But it took a long time, and that meant that the linen, this very valuable commodity, sat out on fields like this week after week, exposed to would-be thieves. And that is why we have this little building, this modest little round tower, which is in fact a watchman's hut. And the man who would be responsible for looking after the linen would squeeze himself in here. Let's hope he was a thinner man than me. And sitting inside, he had access to a little porthole on this side, a little porthole on that side, and he would keep an eye out, no doubt armed to the teeth. Now, he could not sit down in there, nor could he lie down, so he had to stay awake on the job to ensure that nobody came along and pilfered his precious linen. And just to give you some idea of how valuable the linen was regarded, up until the year 1811, it was a mandatory death sentence for anybody who was found stealing it.
You don't always have to rely on the no doubt scholarly but inevitably second-hand accounts of the historians in order to discover more about the linen industry in these parts. This rather elegant lady I'm with is Molly Toll, who worked as a weaver in the Hazelbank factory until it closed down in the 1960s. She still weaves quite a story.
This wasn't the part of the factory in which you worked.
Oh, no, and the looms weren't. The looms were over in there.
The looms were over in the other
Yes,
building on the side. So what was here?
They brought the cloth up here. You know, the cloth, before it went away, wherever they took it, you know.
Yeah,
We carried it out over our arms until the wee cloth office over there.
yeah.
And then the cloth passer passed it, you know. See if there's any faults on it. If there's any faults on it, you were fined, you know, sixpence.
You were fined sixpence?
Sixpence.
Oh, and what age were you whenever you started here?
14.
You were only 14?
Yes, I left school on a Friday, 14, and started here on the following Monday.
On the following Monday?
Yes, and you got 6 weeks to learn the weaving.
So you were a weaver?
I was a weaver,
Right,
yes.
okay,
Then
right.
those whiners, they done the bobbins.
This is a bobbin I'm holding here.
Well, that's
No,
a
it's a shuttle, sorry, I'm holding
But
here in my
they
hand.
done the bobbins. It's pretty hard in the bobbin to show you. See,
Right.
we pulled that up,
Yeah.
and we got the bobbin and put it down there, and pulled the thread out and put a wee nut on and pushed it down.
Right.
Then we had to push the wee nut through there, and in through there, and suck it through there.
Suck it? They literally get in and like that, suck the thing
yes,
out.
many times when it choked, it went down too quick.
Ugh. Yes. It wasn't too pleasant at all.
No, it wasn't
Yeah,
too
yeah.
pleasant, that's right.
Right. So but that was the only way of doing it.
What was the only way of doing that?
And this one flying backwards and forwards, is that right?
That's right, and it came out oftener than it was going.
It wasn't supposed to come out,
I
in other
remember
words.
a girl got her eye out, and she was a whiner, but the toilets were in the weaving shop,
Yeah.
and she was coming round to the toilets, and a shuttle flew out and hit her in the eye. She lost her eye.
Good Lord.
And there was no compensation in them days. Do you know what you got? A glass of eye.
I don't believe you.
Called her
That was the compensation?
Called her trees a boil. That was her compensation.
Good Lord. Right.
And then I thought I got with it.
And minutes of thump you got with it as
On the
well.
head, on the mouth one time.
Well, why was that, Molly?
You see, we slubs on the yarn, and the shuttle flew out, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes they flew out and into all people's limbs and broke.
Right. So that was
And
a
it was
constant hazard of that happening all
That's
the time.
right, all
really?
the time. Yes, that's true, but dangerous. And if a wee scalp had to come off, and you didn't see it when you
Aye.
were putting it in again, you had to go and find your shuttle then. Sometimes you couldn't find wherever it went.
I see.
But if it had been a wee scalp off here, we used to have to bring sandpaper, you know.
Right.
But it would pull the yarn out on you.
I see. Right. So it had to be kept smooth and at all times.
Yes, that's a good smooth one there now.
Yeah. Right. So that was a very important part of the work that you did.
That's right.
And if that wasn't working right, nothing was right. Would that be
That's
fair
right.
to say? Yeah?
Yes,
Yeah? Yeah. So there you go. And was it that kind of one that you worked with there? Just
That was the
exactly
very
like that?
same, one of them.
Right, right.
But in later years, you say, I went to another factory. It was a mill, you call it Blackers Mill, and that's self-threaders, you know.
Self-threaders.
It was just
right.
the same as that, you put the bobbin in, but whatever way it was here, you know, you could have got it out like that, you hadn't to suck it.
You hadn't a socket. So this is
But that was in my day.
this is a sucker one, in other words. Right, right.
That's true.
Okay. So you started at 14, and you were trained to be a weaver.
6 weeks you got. And
6
then-
weeks.
Then they give you one loom and you stood, you left who was learning. I learned with my mom, she was working in the time.
Yeah.
She's happy. And then they give you one loom for about a month. And then my pay was only 3 and 10 pence a week for the 6 weeks I was learning.
3 and 10 pence a
3
week.
and 10, 3 shillings and 10 pence, right. Well then, when I got a loom, I earned, they paid you 7 and 6 pence. But when I got 2 looms, you had to make your own pay. And I remember making 15 shillings. My mom thought it was great.
15 shillings
15 shillings a week,
in 1 week.
yes.
Right. So was the work hard? Would you describe the work as hard, Molly?
Oh, I think it was hard.
Really?
It wasn't day to hand, it was very hard.
Hmm.
Hard job, nah.
Well, you were only a young teenager, really, practically a child when you started.
That's all the kind of work there was in my day. You know,
Yeah.
you had to go into the factories.
Yes. And were there holidays as well? Did you?
Yes, we got holidays. We got a week of July, and there was no holiday pay then.
No holiday pay.
No holiday pay. It was a week you had no pay.
So they just let you go, and that was it.
No holiday pay. That's right.
So did you get away for holidays at all? Did you get away anywhere? Or,
Only got about one day in Warren Point.
a day in Warren Point.
In the year.
Right, right. And that was your whole holiday for the year. Was that the idea?
That's right. That's right.
Right. So they were tough times, really,
They were-
Molly,
they
weren't
were
they?
really tough times. You're right. They were indeed.
Goodness me, yeah.
Tough times indeed, but you suspect that Molly and her friends, many of whom she pointed out to me in this old 1938 photograph, saw them through with grace and goodwill and optimism. They had so little to look forward to that any good times they did have are etched forever in the memory or occasionally fondly recalled from fading photographs.
And Mr. Maz gave us a trip to Dublin once a year. And the first place we went, I think it was Tullylish, and we got a lovely dinner, 3-course dinner for half a crown in them days.
Is that right? Right.
And that was during the war. We didn't have enough coupons to buy, you know, to save our coupons we went in old shoes.
Right.
And we threw our old shoes away and come home with new shoes.
She went to Dublin and bought the new shoes and put them on you. Is that the idea? Ah,
But
right,
this
right.
woman, she bought a pair of boots.
Right.
And she was a bit of a character, and so was her husband, Sam and Harriet.
Yeah.
So Harriet, she wouldn't throw her shoes away. So coming home, coming home in the bus, she had the shoes on the seat and she put the boots on. Then she put, she took the boots off and then she put the shoes on to come to the border. Well, we were brought into the ladies' searcher, and I had a wee pair. My eldest wee boy was only starting to work, and you couldn't have got a wee pair of boots during the war, you know,
No.
for a child.
Right.
And I bought a wee pair of boots for Jack, and I had one under every arm. But I was lucky enough to get away with the boots. She'd never seen them. You know, wee child's boots.
You had a child's bit under every arm, as you said.
Yes,
Yeah.
a wee boot under every arm. But Harriet lost her boots.
Ah.
And we were all devastated about Harriet. But she said before we come to the border, she says, if I get through with these boots, I'll do the Highland Fling for you. So we're in an awful state about Harriet.
Right.
But in a wee while, when she got over it, she got up back, she says, I promise to do the Highland Fling, I'll do it for you. She danced up and down the bus. Well,
So she did the Highland Fling regardless. She didn't get the boots, but she did the Highland Fling anyway.
She was good sport.
She was a good sport, Harriet.
And
that's
so
for
was
sure.
Sam.
Yeah.
So she put her arms round Sam and she said, I wouldn't have cared, only it was Sam's money bought them for me.
Well, when you think of how hard people had to
Oh,
work for their
that's right,
money,
That's right. Yes, we saved up, you know, a few shillings every week to have a wee
Yeah.
bit of extra money for going on the trip.
yes, we can laugh about it now, but I'm quite sure at the time it was quite a devastating blow to lose that.
It was terrible,
yeah.
it really was. Like.
Yeah.
And then they wanted till, you know, we didn't have much money left, but some of them said maybe we should put it together and give her the money to buy another pair. But another woman said, she would be annoyed if we'd done that, you know. She
Yeah.
was very independent, so
Yes,
we
yes.
just had to let it go, you know.
Well, very. At
But
least,
then,
yeah.
when in my young day, like I would have been a brave age then, during the war. But anyway, I remember at one time that I had a picnic to Kieran Low.
Yes.
Picnic. to
Lovely
Kieran
spot.
Low.
Yeah. A picnic?
You know where it is?
Well,
Do you?
yes, I do sure, yes, yes.
Well, one of the workers, she collected tuppence a week after us on the tuppence till she got enough money for 2 crates of lemonade. And one wee photo of it.
Yes.
I had 2, but I couldn't find the other one.
Yeah.
The men were standing the crates on. They carried the crates. They walked at the Cairnlock, you see.
Give away that.
And they carried the crates minnows on their heads.
On their head. So that was the whole point of the picnic, or the whole point of the lemonade. That was your treat for the day on
That was
the,
it.
on
That's how it
the
worked.
picnic.
Now, we worked on Saturdays till 11 o'clock. Was it 11 or 12? I think it was 11. And we cleaned our looms after that. And then walked at the Cairnlock for the picnic.
Right. So you were free Saturday afternoon. You're off.
And all the children in Lawrencetown followed us.
All the children in Lawrencetown.
Walked the way up the hill away to Cairnlock and all
Yeah.
the children after.
Yeah. You thought nothing of walking on those days anyway, sure you didn't?
No, that's right.
As long as you had a good pair of
We
boots,
had
which not everybody had, obviously.
no cars, I can tell
And no
you.
cars either. Yeah. Anybody from this area will know that this rather charming looking building behind me is a well-known landmark, and they know exactly what it's used for. But I just wonder, if you were dropped suddenly out of the sky in front of it, are there any clues that could tell you what goes on inside it, or why people come here? Well, there are a few things you can tell immediately by its appearance. You've got a rather ancient looking clock up in the wall here, quite a unique feature. And it says 10 o'clock, but I suspect it's been saying 10 o'clock for a long number of years. You also have windows, Georgian windows, and an archway at the entrance, which suggests that it's a couple of 100 years old. Fair enough. Also, at this side of the entrance, under the clock and the archway, you have 2 stone pillars on either side, and they were to protect the upright pillars from the wheels of carriages and gigs which would have arrived just at this spot. Passengers would disembark here and be protected from the elements by the roof over this colonnaded area. It has a kind of Italian feel or a continental feel to it because of this kind of cloistered area. There are roses growing up the sides, so it's a pretty area. It's a place that people obviously can sit out on seats and enjoy the view. But we still really have no clue as to what people did when they came here. Well, they came here to meet, and in that simple word, there's a big, big clue. But there's an even bigger clue, which you'll find in the garden at the back. This is what you'll find at the back of the building. It's a graveyard, but it's a kind of graveyard that most of us would be unfamiliar with. All of the headstones are of a size, they're lying down flat on the ground. There's a uniformity about them, and there's a plainness about them that give you the real clue as to the identity of the people who meet here. This is a Quaker graveyard, and here we have the graves of the Society of Friends, strictly equal in life and strictly equal in death as well.
We are in fact at the Quaker Meeting House at Moyallen, a building which has an important niche in the history of this area. Very shortly now, we'll put the message at the bottom of that sign to the test. Pioneers of the linen industry founded at Moyallen, and many of the mill-owning families throughout the last 200-odd years, were Quakers. There was never any real doubt in my head as to the nature of the welcome I'd receive at Moyallen Meeting House. It's not for nothing that the Quakers are called the Society of Friends. My 2 friendly guides on this occasion are Elizabeth and Noel Cinnamon, and I have to say that had I been expecting some kind of pious solemnity in their manner towards me, then I would have been delightfully disappointed.
Would it be as strong in these parts as it would have been in the past in terms of numbers of people?
No, we're very, very weak. This meeting here, we would have
about 25 members and about 10 children.
Right.
Now, we wouldn't get all of them on Sunday, but it's quite small now. Although it used to be very big.
Yes.
And there's a gallery at the back in the main meeting house, and that used to be packed many, many years ago. Because we're talking 100 years ago or more.
That's right.
So this
it was
building
quite
itself,
small.
I saw downstairs at 1736.
1736 it was built, yes.
I mean, how much of this is original since 1736 that we're looking at here now?
1780 would be, it was extended.
Yes.
And this here would be, most of it would go from 1780. But it's pretty old, and you know.
Yes.
It's very, very well maintained, I have to say that.
Yes,
I mean,
it
really
is.
some
Yes,
spick
we
and
do look
span.
after it.
Yes, you absolutely do.
Well, it's-
And here, Elizabeth, would have been,
Yes.
you were saying this is the women's meeting
This
was
is
here.
women's meeting used to be here.
When you had segregation?
Yes, right, yes.
Right.
We don't have that anymore.
You don't have that anymore.
We all sit together and anyone can speak. Women can speak equally with men.
We should bring that back, keep the women away from the men. They're up here running all the men down, run them down. You see.
Very friendly of you to say that. Right. So the men and the women mix freely
Oh,
now.
yes,
in other
yes,
words.
for
Okay.
sure.
And is that a modern phenomenon only, or
Oh,
That's been on
quite
for about, say,
a long time ago,
over
yes.
200 years, virtually, I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, and women play very much a part of the ministry. I mean, some of the best ministry I've ever heard has come from women, and we've always regarded the equality of the sexes right back in the early days. A very strong point with Quakers.
You've a lot of catching up to do after your previous remark. I see you've started already. So I just noticed the portrait up here of a very famous Quaker
Yes.
lady is Elizabeth Fry.
Yes.
She pioneered the prison reform in the early days. I live in Australia, and they're familiar with her out there because she got quilts and got the women prisoners to make quilts, so they had something to sell when they got to Australia. So give them a wee bit of start in life. I mean, in those days, the prisons were terrible places. And again, she pioneered prison reform. And Quakers take up unpopular causes. I mean, here in the Troubles, the visitor centres at the Mays prison, and Elizabeth worked there, was run by Quakers.
Yes. Did
cause
provide tea and support for women and their children when they came in there.
Yes.
Causes that other people would find unpopular.
Sure.
Looking after immigrants and prisoners and those sort of causes, and anti-slavery in the early days. You know, the Quakers were very strong.
But for all those reasons as well, would be the kind of people that other adversaries would trust as go-betweens, perhaps, or as peacemakers or something in the middle. Would that be the case too?
That's right. And trust is an interesting word, because one of the things we like to believe in Quakers, we have a tremendous integrity and honesty. So in the early days, when Quakers were being persecuted, they had to have business of their own because nobody would employ them.
I see.
So, because of their integrity, they were good people to do business with. People, you could send your child to a Quaker shop. They wouldn't be cheated in the measures. They wouldn't be cheated in the change. So those businesses prospered. Banks would lend money to Quakers because they knew they'd move heaven and earth to pay their debts back. And if you were bankrupt in the early days, you had to leave the Society of Friends, because Quakers were expected to pay their debts in full.
Pay their way.
Yes. So they were popular with bankers to lend money to.
So honesty was absolutely central.
Imperative.
Yes. Honesty and integrity.
An imperative.
Yes.
And it did create that prosperity, because if you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't gamble, you don't fornicate, you're going to end up with money.
What do you do? What do you do with money? Yes.
So they were the type of people who were able to gather capital up. And when capitalism came in the early 19th century, Quakers were sitting in a wonderful position to gather capital together to build these factories and the mills, because they were considerable capital expenditure.
Absolutely.
So,
well, you lost me a wee while there, because you had nearly got me persuaded, but then when I thought of all the things I'd have to be
you had to give up.
You know? But
We don't proselytise.
You don't proselytise, but you do a reasonably good job without even letting on to do it. But I mean, how did the fact that all of these quite wealthy, let's face it, at the end of the day, these were wealthy mill owners, extraordinarily wealthy by any standards. How did that sit with their Quakerism and the fact that they couldn't any longer pretend we're all equal, because we've got lots and lots and lots of money, folks, and you don't necessarily have it.
That's a good question, Joe. It sits uncomfortably with Friends,
Yes.
and Friends always did have a conscience about this, even though they tried to be as plain as they possibly could in their dress. But if you look at that house down the end of the road there, it's a big house. It did sit uncomfortably with Friends, and Friends still have trouble with how to handle wealth, but that was one of the reasons why they put wealth back into the community. They built the schools,
the orphanages, all of the other services, and the
Yes.
welfare of people was their
That's right.
concern.
And you go to Bestwick, it's a wonderful example of a model village.
Yeah.
And those houses are high quality houses. They built a town hall, They built the church, Catholic Church, they built the Presbyterian Church, and built the Church of Ireland. Quaker Richardson family did that.
So they took the governance of the local community really in hand, didn't they?
Very much
they
so.
became the government, really.
That's right. Yes, well, in Bellsbrook there wasn't a police station, there wasn't a pawn shop, there wasn't a pub.
No need for them.
No.
No need for them.
And not in Moyallen either.
Not in Moyallen either.
So they were paternalistic, but you know, it's a wonderful community to live in.
Yes, and the proof of that was, as you said, growing up here. This was a
Oh,
very
yes,
happy childhood.
Lovely. It really was. They were
Yes.
very concerned with all our welfare.
Especially Marion Richardson. Marion Richardson was one of our Quaker saints. We were very proud of her. She was one of the main ministers in the meeting. She looked after the children. The son took the Sunday school. She was a great one for welfare. I mean, her contribution to this community could never be underestimated or overestimated. She was just a very wonderful person and deeply missed by us all.
There's no doubting the deep affection and respect that local Quakers have for the late Mary Ann Richardson, evidenced by the stories they tell of her kindness and generosity. It's fair to say she would have represented the maternalistic side of the Milnoring dynasties. There followed a tour of the main meeting hall and consideration of what might be called the Quaker uniform.
A Quaker bonnet.
A bonnet.
Now, it's very, very old, probably 150 years old, and this one came from Derrimore House in Bessbrook.
Right.
And it was found a couple of years ago when they were clearing out the house, and this and another one were flattened. Actually, a box of books was sitting on top of them. So I was asked to try and see if I could get it brought back to its former glory.
So you've done a wee bit of work on it,
Well,
have you?
I've
already,
steamed it because it was totally flat. I've steamed it so that I could get it onto this head. But I think I'll just leave it as it is.
Yes.
I've been told that it would be destroyed if someone tried to sort of fix it up in any shape or form.
Would you
But
have
this
any
is what the
idea how old
ladies.
it is at all now?
I would say over about 150 years old.
Really?
Yes.
Right.
And of course, in those days, all ladies wore bonnets in
Yes.
meetings for worship.
Well,
It's rather
you had to wear a
nice.
bonnet
You
when
had to
came
wear,
out
yes,
here.
you did. You had to
The
wear.
Quakers
cover-
always had a uniform, this idea of equality, everybody had to dress the same. And so they had to, the men used to wear these wide brimmed hats, women wear these bonnets.
Simplicity
Plain-
was everything.
plain dress.
Plain and simple.
That,
Have you
There
tried
aren't
this
too
on?
many
Have you
that
tried this on
no,
yourself?
I think my head's too big.
I'm just going to say it's quite a small one,
Yes,
isn't it?
it is a small one. I
it's
thought
almost
it
like
might have been a
child's.
child's.
Could be a
Yes, I
child's.
thought it might be a child's.
Yeah.
But there aren't too many of them around now, and we're very privileged to have that one and another
And they
one.
would have been known as Quaker bonnets.
Oh yes, Quaker
They-
bonnets.
There,
that's
there
right.
actually was a style of
Yes,
them that.
And Elizabeth Fry in the photograph, she's wearing one.
wearing one,
Yes,
as well.
hers is a little bit fancier than that one, but
Right.
we feel privileged to have that one.
Very good. There you go.
This is the kind of vehicle, horse-drawn I mean, that would have been pulling up outside of the Moyallen meeting hall for a lot longer than the horseless variety would have been doing. This is just one of a number of gigs, carriages, coaches and even caravans that Paul Monaghan has come to care for. And he's come to care for these modes of transport from a bygone age because they're part of a collection that Paul's father has been lovingly putting together throughout his life. Fortunately, Paul's inherited some of his father's passion for horses and gigs as well. It's a world apart really in here. It's even got its own language.
Now, Jeremy is the driver, okay? And a Phaeton is this one here, which is like a four-seater essentially, is that the
Basically,
idea?
aye.
Right, and it's got four wheels.
Well, you can have a two-wheeled Phaeton as well. It's just,
yeah.
there's certain terms that, the gig has two wheels. This is a governess cart, or we would call it a trap, T-R-A-P.
This one here.
Yeah.
Right.
That would have been very, very common in Ireland,
That's the one, if you don't remember, sorry for interrupting you, but I think that's the one that they had on The Quiet Man.
That's right.
Isn't that right?
That's dead
Where
right.
you had the wee matchmaker character.
That's right.
He sat in that all the time.
That's absolutely right. I'm trying to think of his name.
The
But
actor.
do you know, I'll tell you a story, Joe.
Michelin was his
Michelin,
character name,
yeah.
as far as I remember.
Yeah, hold on a second now. I'm trying to think of his name and I can't remember.
It wasn't Barry Fitzgerald.
Barry Fitzgerald,
It
it
was
was.
Barry Fitzgerald, right.
But there are about 300 of the actual traps that Barry Fitzgerald was in The Quiet Man. Because
well.
every time you go to buy one, it's the actual one.
So everybody says, "Oh, this is
This is
the trap
the
that was
one.
in The Quiet,"
This is the one.
and that puts its price up, I would imagine,
Yep.
as well. Yeah.
In fact, In fact, there was a trap in it that Maureen O'Hara drove. That's what she drove the pony in. But it was a side car or a jaunting car.
Yes.
He actually, when
Yes.
John Wayne arrived, he took him Killarney. There's one of those sitting outside. I'll show it to you.
Yeah, one of those as well.
There are two types of those. There's a private one where you don't have a seat for the Jarvey, and then there's the one with the Jarvey seat.
I see. So these a governess cart. Is it?
Well, that's what the English in
Yeah.
England they would call it a governess cart. In
Yeah,
Ireland would
yeah.
call it a trap.
Right. So these have all been climbed over the years, mostly by your father.
That's
Paul, is
right.
that the
No,
case? Yeah.
Nearly all by my father.
All of my family. How many did you count?
He would have nearly 60. They would, and he bought them, Joe, at a time when, when they were lying in bits in the back of somebody's shed.
Yes.
I mean, he bought a lot of these when they were very, very badly run down.
So they wouldn't have been worth anything to
No.
at least the people who had them
Some
at
of,
that time.
some of these were bought. I mean, we're talking 40 years ago now,
Of course.
maybe longer, right?
Yeah.
You bought some of these at that time for 10 or 15 quid.
So they had been coming to the end of actually a useful life, really,
That's
those
right.
things, because they were still being used back in
Absolutely.
those days
Yeah.
for transport.
Oh, aye.
Right. So people got cars and said, right, that's the end of that, don't need it anymore,
That's right.
and it becomes rubbish.
Well, you take, for example, I mean, I remember when I was a child down in Lawrencetown there was a pub called Molly Smith's, and there would have been people that would have gone, the horse would have stood outside,
Yeah.
and they'd have lain up half full and gone home,
And the horse would take them home.
would nearly taken them home.
Yeah,
That's not that long ago,
Well,
really.
true
you know.
enough. I remember a few stories around the country about horses that knew the way home better than their
I know,
neighbours, that's
I
for
know.
sure.
Cue for a quick trip on a gig, if ever I heard one. Not that Paul and I were heading for a pub or anything, but given the weather that was in it, maybe a drop of something to warm the extremities and insulate the brain wouldn't have been such a bad idea.
Exciting and all as that was, Paul. I think the stretch is the better part of valor now at this stage.
The horse and I had a mutual counselling session afterward and parted on good terms. Another landmark building in these parts, product of the huge wealth created here in the 19th century, is Elmfield. Built by a James Dixon in 1864 and subsequently home of a family called Hugh Pritchard, a name synonymous with both linen and Quakerism along the valley of the Upper Bann. You're going to meet a most distinguished representative of that name presently. First, a curious tale of a document that was discovered here at Elmfield.
It's hard to believe looking at the place now because there really isn't any physical sign of it remaining. But during the war years, there was a very large prisoner of war camp here at Elmfield, housing some 1,800 German prisoners of war. Now, there are all sorts of stories relating to that period. One, for example, of a number of Germans who would escape under the fence every night, go to the house of a local farmer where they would enjoy an Ulster fry before returning in the morning. 4 prisoners actually did escape, but they were picked up within a couple of days. 2 of them heading southward following the railway line to Dublin. When the war ended, it was actually a full 3 years later before all the Germans were repatriated. So in 1948, there was a big sale of Nissen huts here, attended by bidders from all over the country. But it was in the rafters of one of the huts bought by a local man that this was found. Or I should say, this is a copy of something that was found. The original was only about a quarter of this size. And it's quite an accurate map of Ireland, but there's something very strange about it. If you look carefully, you'll see that whilst all the waterways are named, Loch Ness, Loch Earn, Loch Derg, or Dirk, as the Germans might have it, but none of the cities outside of Dublin are actually mentioned on the map. No cities, no towns. We assume that this was an aid for some Germans who wanted to escape from the prisoner of war camp, but unless they were going to swim their way out of it, I don't know how this map would have been useful to them.
The term gentleman was once used to refer to someone of perceived superior social status. Not a happy concept for egalitarian Quakers, we must suppose. But it's also used to refer to someone who's earned the respect and admiration of all because he has been, well, a gentleman. Either reference would be appropriate for Master Albert. Henry Albert G. Pritchard, now in his 91st year, was born and mostly reared at Elmfield. Unquestionably with a silver spoon in his mouth, unquestionably a member of the landed gentry, and well known subsequently as a celebrated equestrian and master of the hunt, but would be best known to present generations locally for his contribution to the sport of boxing, both as exponent and as referee. He's accompanied here by Anne Murphy, herself a boxing referee, and Anne so admired Master Albert's qualities and achievements that she wrote a book about him.
Albert was born, Master Albert, here in this fabulous castle, and now, I suppose 90 years on, he lives in the boxing club that he created in Hall's Mill, and I knew there was a story there. I wanted to listen to that story, and I thought it'd be interesting for other people to listen to it as well. So he was born Master Albert, but through his life he actually had the title of Master Albert bestowed on him by the community, which is another story.
Well, normally, you don't mind us talking about you in your presence here as if you're not here. Normally, master, as a description of a man, usually refers to the local school teacher. Used to refer to the local school teacher. In your case, it was master of the hunt, isn't that? Isn't that where the title came from?
Yes.
And that's another thing that you were heavily involved in.
That's right. And my father was master of the hunt before me, you see. So.
It's actually interesting too, Joe, when Albert started boxing, because he got a pair of gloves for, it was your 9th birthday, was it, Albert? Your 8th birthday? Your 8th birthday, and Mourne Grange set up the boxing ring in the badminton hall, which is a nice story as well, and invited some local lads round for.
We had sofas, which made the ring, so that if you're knocked over, you fell into the sofa.
You fell into a sofa.
You weren't too bad.
Right. Well, what was it that you liked about the boxing? Was it? I mean, were you good at it yourself? Were you? Yes.
I was considered to be very good style, but I wouldn't say I was.
Yeah. Did you have to be aggressive to be a boxer? I mean, we associate boxing with fighting, but no, it was an art.
An art.
Right. Okay.
The best defence in amateur boxing is one step back.
One step back.
And then you hit.
Right.
But you make the other man make the first move, and you go one step back, and then. And.
But you were a fairly competent referee now, and refereeing was probably your favourite thing about boxing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Albert has had such a long and varied career that it's difficult to do justice to the man in a short time. Perhaps this story of Albert and the local poacher will give a bit of insight into the nature of the man. As landowner and poacher, they should have been adversaries, but...
I got very friendly with him, and he taught me an awful lot about the art of
poaching.
And what you did to entice a rabbit to run a certain place where the trap was. It's snared. And then when the gamekeeper that we had here, James Moonan, he was away from RD, and when he died, I approached my father, and he said, who will we get in place of Moonan? And I said, well, now you not maybe like what I'm going to say, but I would like that you would appoint Valentine Ruddock.
And your father knew this name by this stage, did he? Yes, he knew who Valentine Ruddock was.
He did, and of course he did his nut. He thought he was a poacher,
yeah.
But anyhow, I persuaded him to
give him the job?
Yes. And he gave him the job as gamekeeper.
Right.
And a brilliant one he turned out to be.
So he was the original poacher turned gamekeeper, in other words. Right.
Yes.
Literally true.
Yeah, that's right. And when I took the Northland hounds to Elmfield here, just up the way from here, we kennelled them there, and I turned Valentine Ruddock into my a kennel man,
Did
and
he?
he looked after hounds
Looked after the hounds.
as
Right.
well as doing gamekeeper.
Right. So by this stage you obviously got to like and trust him and
yes.
admired him, obviously, I think. Yeah.
I did. He was a great, and an awful, tremendous knowledge of animals. And
But it strikes me that you were very open to people, Albert. Well, would you find that true with this man throughout his life? You know, I mean,
Yeah,
even in those circumstances, like,
yeah.
you know, bringing
I would
somebody
say
into
even
the
though he
family
was
circle.
kind of born with a silver spoon in his mouth, I don't think he disagree with that, but he had tremendous common touch
Yeah.
and got to know the ordinary people and the
Yeah.
local people and got a great
Rapport with
yes,
people as well. Would
tremendous
you agree with
rapport.
that, Albert, yourself?
I hope so. Yes,
Yeah.
I did feel that.
Yeah.
That they trusted me and so on. And
You didn't grow up feeling a cut above everybody around you, in other words. It doesn't seem, you know, even though you grew up, and as Anne said, with a silver spoon in your mouth in this place here.
no, I didn't feel that at all.